Hello and welcome to the workshop on keeping calm and quarantining on. Today we're going to be talking about managing anxiety and expectations during this global pandemic of COVID-19. My name is Meredith Kriz and I'm a licensed professional counselor and supervisor and the owner of Foundations Counseling in McKinney, Texas. And so today we're going to be talking about how our world has changed drastically in the recent past and how we can better manage ourselves in it. So what I've been telling my clients is we are all experiencing trauma right now. The entire nation, the entire world, we are having this shared experience, a traumatic experience together. But we're all experiencing that trauma in different ways. I heard it described in this way, and I thought it was a really apt description. So for some people, this is just kind of like a light drizzle, right? And just a real light rain. And then for other people, it's a full-on thunderstorm, hurricane even. And sometimes you can vacillate between those two extremes, even over the course of a day. You may wake up one day and feel like it's not that big of a deal, and you can just kind of go on with your life. And maybe by the end of that day, you're over it and you don't know what to do. No matter where you are in that spectrum, a really common response is increased stress and anxiety. And so we're going to be talking about that quite a bit today. It's really helpful to understand how we experience stress and anxiety and how you personally feel stress and anxiety, because it does feel different for everyone. If you can start to understand how you personally experience increased stress, increased anxiety, both physically and emotionally, that is a really great first step to becoming emotionally healthier. So some common responses of how you might experience increased stress and anxiety in an emotional way are increased frustration, irritability, a really short fuse, anger, crying. All of these things can be anxiety or stress related. And then also in a physical way, we experience stress and anxiety in really big physical ways. These can include headaches, jaw pain because you're clenching your jaw, stomach issues, rapid heart rate, or even feeling like you have pressure on your chest. You may be picking at your nails or your skin. There's all kinds of ways you can experience anxiety in a physical way. And so again, if you can just be aware of what those are for you, that's a really great first step. Now, a helpful tool to start to decrease that level of stress and anxiety are some mindfulness skills. And we're going to do one here in just a minute. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about why mindfulness might be helpful. A lot of people think that if you're practicing mindfulness, that automatically means that you're happy, and that's not necessarily the case. Mindfulness is really about being fully present in the moment right here and now. And that might mean that you feel calm and peaceful and relaxed, but it also may mean that you're just aware of what's going on and the situation around you, and then you can work on how you can accept that situation. So it's about being aware of the present moment and accepting it for what is without judgment. When you're first starting to practice mindfulness skills, it is very, very common for you to be horrible at it. And that's okay. The analogy that I like to use is when you're training a puppy to sit, okay? So when you're training a puppy to sit, you don't expect the puppy to sit and stay the very first time you tell it to. You don't even really expect it to sit and stay the 10th time you tell it to, or even the 50th time you tell it to. But every time you do, if you're diligent about it and you really stick to it, the puppy will eventually start to learn. And first it may not sit and stay at all, and then it may sit and stay for just a few seconds. But then eventually that puppy's gonna sit and stay for maybe even minutes at a time if it's really well trained. The same thing can be said for us and for our brains, right? So when we practice mindfulness, it's really important to keep in mind that you're not going to be perfect at it and that that's okay. That's part of mindfulness, actually, is to accept what is without judgment. And that includes not judging yourself. So right now we're going to practice a mindfulness exercise called the body scan. For this mindfulness practice, I'd like for you to sit comfortably but alertly. And if you're comfortable with it, go ahead and close your eyes. Begin by bringing your attention into your body. You can notice your body seated wherever you're seated, feeling the weight of your body on the chair or on the floor. And take a few deep breaths. And as you take a deep breath, bring in more oxygen, enlivening the body. And as you exhale, have a sense of relaxing more deeply. You can notice your feet on the floor. Notice the sensations of your feet touching the floor, the weight and pressure. You can notice your legs against the chair, the pressure, the heaviness or lightness. Take a breath. Notice your back against the chair. Bring your attention into your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, let it soften. And take a breath. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft and take a breath. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft. Relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. Then notice your whole body present and take a breath. Be aware of your whole body as best you can. Take one more breath, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So I'm wondering what that experience was like for you, especially if that was one of the first mindfulness exercises you've ever done. It's very common to feel weird about it, for it to have felt awkward, but also maybe just a little bit peaceful. I hope that was the case for you. And just remember, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time and a lot of diligence to really build a mindfulness practice. I would just encourage you to keep at it, to try to practice just a few minutes of mindfulness every day. Google it. There's literally thousands of different exercises that you can do to practice mindfulness. Find something that works for you, find something that feels right and good for you, and just keep practicing. And when you find your mind wandering, know that that's okay, and just gently bring yourself back without judgment, without negativity towards yourself. If you keep doing that on a daily basis for even just a few days, you're going to start to notice a difference. So as we're thinking about implementing mindfulness skills to reduce our stress and anxiety, I think this next image is really helpful in understanding why we're doing these things. I think especially when this pandemic first started, a lot of us were living in that fear zone. We were scared. We didn't know what was going to happen. And really, by reducing our stress and anxiety, we can push ourselves out of that fear zone and into the learning zone and even the growth zone. I think that's the goal, really, is to learn to live in that growth zone. At the same time, it's also understandable to revert back to the fear zone from time to time. And that's really when mindfulness can be really helpful. If we can notice that, notice where we are, understand why we're moving back into that fear zone, and then shift gears out of that fear zone and really focus on what we need to do to get to that learning zone and even the growth zone, we're going to feel really a lot better. We just have to remember that nobody is functioning at 100% right now. That includes your partner, your kids, nobody is. If we can be aware of that and just give ourselves some grace and give others some grace as well, we're going to be better for it. And then that really kind of moves us to this concept I want to talk about, which is called radical acceptance. Now, radical acceptance is about figuring out what we do and don't have control over, and then knowing what to do when we don't have control over something. When there's something that we don't like, when there's something that is out of our control, we spend a lot of time and energy just kind of banging our heads up against a brick wall. We might spend a lot of time and energy trying to change something that just cannot be changed. It's outside of our power to change it. Radical acceptance is about figuring out what we do and don't have control over, and then accepting what we don't have control over, and then shifting our perspective to something that we do have control over. It's about accepting your current reality and also accepting yourself fully. Now, this doesn't mean that you're just gonna roll over and let whatever happen to you, right? I really like this definition. So to practice radical acceptance, we need to accept what is, right? We need to figure out what we can and cannot control. We need to look at the situation in a non-judgmental way, stick to the facts, don't fight the reality, and learn how to live in the present moment despite our pain. So a great example of what radical acceptance really looks like actually happened in one of the very first weeks of the quarantine to a neighbor friend of mine at our grocery store just down the street from us. So she placed an online order for groceries. I don't know how your grocery stores were, especially at the beginning, but ours were really backed up. You could place an order and it would say it would be ready between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, and it wouldn't be ready until 4 or 5. And so you may get there and have to wait a long time. And that's what my friend was doing. She was waiting in her car for her groceries, and she noticed the woman in the car in front of her who was obviously very upset, visibly upset that it was taking so long to get the groceries. She said she saw this woman pounding on her steering wheel. At one point, she even got out of her car and stomped around the car. Like, she was fuming mad, really upset. Meanwhile, my friend knew that it was going to be a wait, and so she was listening to music, she was singing along, she had brought a book with her, she would read, and she accepted her reality, right? And guess what happened? At the end of that long wait, both my friend and the temper tantrum lady got their groceries at the same time. And I guarantee you, my friend left, she was in a good mood, she got her groceries, she checked something off her list, she moved on with her day. Probably that woman in front of her, it probably disrupted her entire day. She was probably in a bad mood the rest of that day because of that experience. The outcome was the same and yet drastically different. And that is radical acceptance. So this is also a good reminder for us to practice radical acceptance on ourselves, right? To fully accept ourselves as we are. We might see other people on social media who seem to be living their best life during the quarantine that we've been having and during this crazy time that we're in. And we may not be feeling that. And we may feel like we have to live up to others' expectations. And that's simply not the case. I really like this meme where, you know, if you don't come out of this quarantine with a new skill and more knowledge in your side hustle, you're doing just fine. We are going through a collective traumatic experience. What may work for some may not work for others, and that's okay. To give yourself some grace, to understand that we may be having a day, we may be having a month, and that's okay. We're just trying to get through it the best we can. And so just because Susie down the street is learning the ukulele and Greek doesn't mean that you're bad. And I really want you to hear that. So this is a time to manage expectations, both of others and of ourselves. We want to make sure that we're giving ourselves grace while also pushing ourselves to be better, right? To create a good balance between accepting ourselves for who we are now and also pushing ourselves to be better. I would really encourage you to be in touch with yourself about how you're feeling at any given time to figure out, do I need to just have a day where I veg on the couch all day and just watch Netflix and not do anything? Or do I need to say, you know what, it's hard for me to get up and be productive right now. Let me just try it for a few minutes and see how that feels. Do you need to push yourself, or do you need to give yourself a lot of grace today? Figure that out. It might change from a day-to-day basis. It might change on an hour-to-hour basis. So trying to create a structure that isn't too rigid, but also isn't too lax. So think about, what does this look like for you? Realistically, what does this look like for you? What does this look like for other members of your household? What happens if different members of your household are in different places and are needing different things? These are really great questions to talk about together and to try to find some common ground. So some things to think about. What has worked for you so far? And how can you build on that, right? Something else to think about is, are you getting your basic needs met? Are you making sure you're getting enough sleep? You're getting enough exercise? You're eating healthy foods? I think especially when the pandemic really first started and we were all on lockdown and quarantining, I think it kind of felt like, this was just something that was momentary. And so we could eat the comfort foods and not get out of bed and, do all of these things that are okay for a few days. And now here we are weeks and weeks later. We need to figure out this new normal and what that looks like. So making sure you're getting enough sleep, limiting drugs and alcohol, eating that healthy food, exercising on a regular basis, all of these things are really important. Maslow has that famous hierarchy of needs, right? For a while now, we've kind of been stuck in those bottom two rungs there, the physiological needs and the safety needs. And so no wonder we've felt off. Our equilibrium has felt all out of whack. We're not used to being stuck down there, We're used to being more in the upper columns there, the love and belonging and the esteem and, of course, self-actualization. But we're stuck down in the physiological needs. That doesn't really happen to us typically. So I think it's just good to keep in mind that life isn't normal right now. We're all just trying to figure out how to get our very basic needs met. That's not a place where we usually are. And so that's one reason that we've all just kind of felt off. Some really specific things that you can do to decrease that stress and anxiety level so that you can function better are those mindfulness skills that we already talked about. Putting a realistic structure into place. Again, one that's not too rigid, but also one that's not too lax, something that has a good amount of balance. Come up with a potential list of things for you to do when you do have just a lot of energy that you want to get out. Come up with a list so you're not like scrambling to try to figure out what to do in the moment. But, maybe it's finally getting that yard work done, or cleaning out that closet, or even just cleaning out a drawer. Just cleaning out one drawer, taking control of that one little thing. It may sound small, but it does give you that sense of accomplishment when you're done. Some other simple things that you can do are limiting your news intake. I myself am a news junkie, and I have to, be aware of how much news I'm taking in. If you can just watch a few minutes in the morning and maybe a few more minutes in the late afternoon, evening, you're probably good for the day. Making sure you're getting your social needs met in a safe way, whether that's, FaceTime or Zoom sessions or driveway parties, whatever that looks like for you, making sure that you are reaching out to others in a meaningful way, still getting FaceTime with other people in a safe way. And then there's several grounding exercises that can be really, really helpful when you're struggling with stress or anxiety. And the first one is just checking in with yourself several times a day throughout the course of the day. Just check in with yourself. See how you're feeling. A lot of us have all kinds of emotions throughout the day that we're not even really aware of, right? And so if you can get in the habit of checking in with yourself and figuring out what it is you're feeling at a given time, if you're not that great with emotions, mad, sad, glad, scared, pick one of those four. Those are the four big ones, right? Mad, sad, glad, scared. Pick one. Then on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you feeling that feeling? Okay, so say you're feeling sad at a level 8. First of all, it's kind of helpful to know what's making that 8 an 8, right? So just being aware of the circumstances that are making that 8 an 8. And then what can you do to not get that 8 all the way down to a 1, because that's unrealistic, right? But what can you do to get that 8 down to, say, a 5? What are some things that you can do right then that can get that 8 down to a 5? That feels a lot more manageable. So again, check in with yourself a few times a day. Some people even set reminders on their phones so that they remember to do that, because especially if you're not in the habit of doing it, it's going to take practice, just like the mindfulness. It's going to take practice, it's going to take diligence. But then once you're doing it, it becomes a habit and it'll get a lot easier. Another real quick and easy grounding exercise is just called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you just take each of the 5 senses, pick something, and just observe and describe it. This is a mindfulness exercise too. Observe and describe. Something else that you can do also with the 5 senses is to actually make a list of things that are pleasing to you. So you get a piece of paper, get on your computer, type on your phone, list out the sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste. Almost forgot the 5th one. Break it down by sense and think about, what do you like to see? What are the things that you like to see? And then how can you increase those in your daily life, right? So simple things like making sure your blinds are open so you can see the outside. Having pictures accessible that you like to look at. Sound, what do you like to listen to? And how can you listen to more of that? And this doesn't just have to be music, right? I had a client who just hung a set of wind chimes outside her kitchen window, and she said, I never would have thought just hearing wind chimes throughout the day would be so nice, and it is. I had another client who recorded his son laughing and then used that as his ringtone on his phone. Get creative with it. Sense of touch, what do you like to feel? Can you just throw a blanket into the dryer and then wrap yourself up in this soft blanket that's also warm? Little things like that, if you are diligent about incorporating these into your daily life, just a few things every day. And then when you're having a really tough day, you can pull all of these things together. So say you can take a bubble bath, light a candle that smells good, have on some nice calming, soothing music, while you're, eating some dark chocolate, just a little bit. If you incorporate all of those things together, almost feels like you're at a spa, and whatever you're feeling at that point, you're gonna feel more relaxed. You're gonna feel less stressed. Doesn't mean that the stuff has gone away. You're just managing it better. Another really great exercise you can do is any kind of breathing exercise. So when we feel stressed out, when we are anxious, we tend to breathe really shallowly through our chest. We don't even realize that we're doing it, right? What a breathing exercise will do is kind of force you to take those long, slow, deep breaths that then pump more oxygen to your brain. You're actually thinking a little bit clearer. You're also reducing your heart rate. So it basically sends a signal to our brain that says, oh, we can be calm now. Instead of that rapid heart rate, shallow breathing that sends a signal to our brain that says, oh, it's time to freak out now. Okay, so I'm going to share with you one of my favorite breathing exercises. Try this one. If you don't like it, it's okay. There are a ton out there. Just try to keep in mind that breathing exercises really can be very helpful in reducing stress and anxiety. So this breathing exercise is called square breathing. So you picture a square and you breathe in through your nose for 4 counts. You hold it for 4 counts. You breathe out through your mouth for 4 counts. And then you rest for 4 counts. And then you do that 4 times. So you inhale for 4, hold 4, exhale 4, rest 4, and then you repeat that 4 times. You can even do that twice in a row. So you're actually doing it 8 times in a row. If you do it more than that, you might get dizzy. So be careful. But if you get in the habit of doing that 2 or 3 times a day, maybe once in the morning, once in the afternoon, definitely once when you're getting in bed, when you're trying to calm down, relax, and go to sleep, it can really be helpful. This isn't as helpful if you're already like at a 9 of stress and anxiety. If you can figure out when you're ramping up and catch yourself when you're more at like that 4 or 5 range, if you can say, oh, hang on a second, I feel myself getting stressed and anxious, I'm feeling some of these physical symptoms, I'm feeling irritable, I think I need to breathe. If you can do it then and catch yourself, then all of a sudden you can get your 4 or 5 down to maybe a 2 or a 3, and then you're good to go. Then you can shift your focus, figure out what you do and don't have control over, focus on that, feel accomplished, you're gonna start to feel better. So I really hope that what I talked about today resonates with you, that you're able to take just a piece or two of what I talked about today with you and start to apply it in your daily life. I would encourage you, if you're struggling, to seek therapy for yourself. These are the kinds of things that we talk about in therapy. This, of course, is not a replacement for that, but I would really encourage you to reach out. We've got really wonderful clinicians here at Foundations Counseling in McKinney. We are ready and willing to serve you in any way that we can. Thank you for watching, and keep calm and quarantine on.